Who were the men who built the stone circles of Scotland? The Ring of Brodgar in Orkney, Callanish on the Isle of Lewis, the village of Skara Brae, older than the pyramids. For most of the last 100 years, the assumption was simple. They were built by your ancestors. The same people who later fought at Stirling Bridge. The same blood that ran in Robert the Bruce. That assumption was wrong. When geneticists finally sequenced the bones of the people who carved those stones and the bones of the people who came after, they found something that did not fit any version of Scottish history written in school books. The men who built the stone circles and the men whose blood you carry are not the same population. To get there, we have to walk into a Bronze Age burial on Rathlin Island, into a Pictish grave in Orkney, and into a small genetic fact you may already be carrying. A fact that quietly explains why 1 in 5 men in this country shares a marker that came from somewhere far east of the Atlantic. We will get to Robert the Bruce, but first, the stone. Skara Brae sits on the western coast of mainland Orkney. The roofs are gone, but the stone furniture is still there. Beds, hearths, dressers, a drainage system that worked. The village was occupied for about 600 years, ending around 2500 before the Common Era. For decades, the assumption was that the people who lived there were the deep ancestors of the modern Scots. Continuous, unbroken, Gaelic before the word existed. Then, ancient DNA arrived. In 2018, a team led by Inigo Olalde at Harvard sequenced over 400 ancient genomes from across Europe. The British samples carried a result the field has not stopped arguing about since. Within roughly 400 years of a new population arriving on the island, somewhere between 2450 and 2000 before Christ, about 90% of the British gene pool had been replaced. 90%. Of the people who built Skara Brae, who raised the stones at Callanish, who carved the spirals into Newgrange. Their descendants did not inherit Britain. A different population did. Before we go further, 3 things you were told about your ancestors. All 3 are wrong. The first myth, that the Scots are the descendants of indigenous Celts who have stood on these islands since the last ice age. The DNA says no. The dominant ancestry of every modern Scot is younger than the pyramids of Giza. The second myth, that the Picts, the painted warriors who fought the Romans, were an exotic foreign people. The Victorians said they came from Scythia. Others said Iberia. Some folklore made them shorter, darker, almost not human. In 2023, ancient DNA from Pictish-era graves in Orkney was sequenced. The Picts were genetically indistinguishable from modern Irish and Scottish people. There was no exotic origin. They were the Iron Age population of the north. The mystery was a story we told ourselves. The third myth, that red hair is a Celtic marker. It is not. The variants in the gene called MC1R, the ones that put copper in the hair of half of Argyll, were rising in frequency before any people the Romans would have called Celts had crossed into Britain. Red hair is older than the Celtic languages by 1,000 years. 3 myths. 1 pattern. The story Scotland was told about itself does not survive contact with the genome. So who replaced the Neolithic Britons? They arrived from continental Europe carrying a particular kind of pottery, bell-shaped drinking vessels archaeologists call beakers. They came in through the Lower Rhine. They reached southern Britain by about 2450 before the Common Era. They reached Ireland and Scotland soon after. What set them apart was not the pottery, it was their genome. The Beaker people carried a genetic signature the British Neolithic samples did not. A signature that did not come from the farmers who built the stone circles. A signature that traced east, far east, to a place no chronicle of Scotland has ever named. And that signature replaced almost everyone who came before. There is a Y-chromosome marker called R1b, specifically a sub-branch labelled L21. It is the dominant male lineage of modern Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and Western England. If your surname comes from any of those places, there is a high chance you carry it. In the Neolithic British samples sequenced so far, 33 skeletons, R1b, appears 0 times. 0. By the Bronze Age, after the Beaker arrival, it accounts for more than 90% of male lineages on the island. Robert the Bruce carried it. So did the man you sit next to at church if your family came over on the Caledonia. So did roughly 1 in 5 men reading the words on this screen. The Celtic Y-chromosome of Scotland, the one tartangent-clad tour guides will tell you marks the true Gael, did not begin on these islands. It did not begin anywhere in the Celtic world. To understand exactly where that marker came from and what it means for the man who fought at Bannockburn, you have to walk through what happened next on these islands. What language those Bronze Age descendants ended up speaking. What kingdoms they built. Why the historians never noticed. Most people scroll past stories like this without ever questioning the version they were taught. You are still here. That puts you with the people who want the record, not the brochure. This is the work this channel exists to do. Subscribe. There is another one coming. The next piece begins with the painted men of the north. For more than 1,000 years, the Picts were the mystery the Romans could not solve. They lived north of the Forth. They tattooed or painted their skin. The name itself, Picti, is Latin for painted ones. They beat Roman legions. They built unreadable symbol stones across the eastern lowlands. And then, around the 9th century, they disappear from the record. Victorians built theories on the mystery. Some traced them to Scythians on the steppe. Some claimed an Iberian origin. Some made them a lost race, almost mythical. The DNA tells a quieter story. In 2023, researchers analyzed individuals buried in Orkney between the 6th and 7th centuries of the Common Era, the heart of the Pictish kingdom. The result was anticlimactic and devastating at the same time. The Picts were genetically continuous with the Iron Age population of northern Britain. They were not exotic. They were not lost. They were not the descendants of Scythians or Iberians or anything else. They were the people who had been living north of the Forth since the Bronze Age, the same population that would later become the Gaelic-speaking Scots. The mystery had been a literary one. The genome was boringly local. Which brings us back to the man who carried the marker. Robert the Bruce won at Bannockburn in 1314 of the Common Era. He died in 1329. His descendants have been studied genetically in the last 2 decades, in part because his lineage runs through several confirmed family lines. The chromosome he carried from father to son, the marker that defines the male side of his bloodline, sits inside R1bL21. The same marker the Beaker migrants carried into Britain in the Bronze Age. The same marker that is functionally absent before 2450 before Christ. The king who fought for Scotland's freedom from English rule carried, in his Y-chromosome, a signature whose deepest ancestry was not Scottish, was not even Celtic. It came from the Pontic steppe, 2,500 miles east of Edinburgh. Cattle herders from what is now Ukraine and southern Russia. They moved west around 3000 before Christ. They mixed into Central Europe. Their descendants crossed the Channel into Britain 4,000 years ago, carrying that steppe genome deep into their bones. The Yamnaya. The men who built the stones did not pass it down. The men who arrived after them did. In 2015, a team led by Stephen Leslie published the highest resolution genetic map of the British Isles to that date. They expected to find a Celtic cluster, a single population shared by Scots, Welsh, Irish, and Cornish. The Romantic version of Celtic identity required it. They did not find one. The Scots, the Welsh, and the Cornish are 3 distinct populations. Cornwall sits closer, genetically, to southern England than to Wales. The Scots cluster splits cleanly into northeast and southwest, a divide that follows the River Forth and matches the old border between the Pictish kingdom and the Gaelic kingdom of Dal Riata. There is no single Celtic blood. The word Celtic is a language family. It is a culture. It is not a population. If your great-grandmother told you that you were Celtic, what she meant was that her family spoke Gaelic, or once did. She did not mean that your DNA belongs to a single ancestral people. That ancestral people does not exist. In 2019, Edmund Gilbert and colleagues sequenced over 2,500 people from across Scotland and Ireland, the largest genetic atlas of the archipelago to date. What they found in the north and west of Scotland was something the romantic Highlander story does not include. In Shetland, between 23 and 28% of the modern ancestry traces to Norway. In Orkney, around 25%. In the Hebrides, about 7%. In Argyll, the western mainland of the old Gaelic kingdom, lower but still real. The source of that Norwegian ancestry can be narrowed. Most of it comes from two specific Norwegian counties, Hordaland and Sogn og Fjordane, the fjord country, the place where Norse longships were built. If your family came from Orkney or Shetland, a quarter of your genome is Viking. Not metaphorically, literally. The Highlander identity was sold to the world as a Celtic identity. The DNA of the actual Highlands and Islands is, in part, Scandinavian. The men who raided Lindisfarne and the men who later sang Gaelic ballads in Stornoway share more chromosomes than the brochure would lead you to believe. Stop and picture this for a moment. The cliffs of Hoy in Orkney, lit gold in the long summer evening. The wind off the North Atlantic. Behind you, a Stone Age tomb, older than written language. In front of you, a Norse dry stone wall built 3,000 years later. The people who walked between them are inside your name. That is what Scotland is. Layers. The same study found something that complicates the line between Scotland and Ireland in a way that political maps cannot capture. In the southwest of Scotland and the north of Ireland, there is a single genetic cluster the researchers labelled SCO-IRE. Members of that cluster cannot be reliably assigned to one country or the other on DNA alone. They share haplotypes. They share recent ancestors. They share a population. Part of this goes back to the 6th century, when the Gaelic kingdom of Dal Riata spanned both shores of the North Channel, a maritime kingdom that had no time for the border that would later be drawn through it. Part of it goes back to the 17th century. The Ulster plantations, when tens of thousands of lowland Scots farmers moved into Northern Ireland. If your name is McCarthy or McAllister or McConnell, if you came over to America from Donegal or Antrim and were told you were Scots-Irish, your DNA does not draw a line between the two. The line was political. The blood was already shared. 3 things people will tell you are Scottish: red hair, blue eyes, the ability to drink milk. All 3 rose in frequency at the same time, around 2000 before the Common Era, tied to the same migration, the Beaker arrival. The variant at a gene called SLC45A2, one of the major contributors to pale skin in modern Europeans, rises sharply after the Bronze Age transition. The variant at HERC2, the one that switches eye color from brown to blue, does the same. The variant at LCT, the one that lets adult humans digest fresh milk, was absent in the Neolithic farmers who built the stone circles. It came in with the steppe descendants who replaced them. The face Hollywood gave you when it cast a Highlander, pale, freckled, blue-eyed, milk-fed, is not Iron Age Celtic. It is Bronze Age steppe. The same arrival brought something else. Less visible, more dangerous. A mutation in a gene called HFE, specifically the variant labelled C282Y, was carried by the Bronze Age men of Rathlin Island, off the north coast of Ireland. Their bones were sequenced in 2015 by a team led by Lara Cassidy at Trinity College Dublin. The variant was already there, already present in the founding population of the insular Atlantic. That variant is what doctors now call the Celtic curse, hereditary hemochromatosis, a condition where the body absorbs too much iron, slowly poisoning the liver, the pancreas, the heart, the joints. Ireland has the highest frequency of this variant in the world. Scotland is close behind. Several % of the population are at risk of clinical disease over their lifetimes. In the Bronze Age, when grain was scarce and meat was rare, holding onto iron was an advantage. The man who absorbed every speck of iron from his thin porridge survived the winter. The man who excreted it did not. That same trait, in 21st century America, in a population eating beef and fortified cereal, is a slow chemical injury. The ancestral advantage and the modern burden are the same gene. If you have ever been told by your doctor to give blood every few months for iron levels, you may be reading the metabolism of a Bronze Age herder. One more thing the same atlas revealed. The Western Highlands and the Hebrides show a different kind of genetic signature than the rest of Britain. Long runs of homozygosity. Long stretches of DNA where both copies came from a recent common ancestor. The marker of a small population. A bottleneck. An isolation. The historical cause is not subtle. Between roughly 1750 and 1860 of the Common Era, the Highland clearances depopulated huge regions of western Scotland. Tenants were evicted to make way for sheep. Entire glens emptied. Hundreds of thousands sailed for Canada, the Carolinas, New Zealand, the ones who stayed married within smaller and smaller pools. The genome of the modern Highlander, in places like Lewis and Harris and the Argyll coast, still carries that bottleneck. The romantic image of an unbroken Highland line is, at the genetic level, a population that survived a collapse, which is where most of the descendants ended up. Around 25 million Americans claim Scottish or Scots-Irish ancestry. They settled in Appalachia, in the Carolinas, in western Pennsylvania. They built the Presbyterian backbone of the early republic. They produced 33 presidents. Jackson, Polk, Grant, Reagan, both Bushes. Andrew Carnegie was born in Dunfermline in 1835. He emigrated to Pittsburgh as a boy. He spent his life convinced that he descended, by some unbroken line, from an ancient Celtic people. He was a man of his century in that belief. The genome does not bear it out. The line Carnegie actually carried, the line millions of Americans of Scottish descent actually carry, runs through Bronze Age herders who crossed the steppe, mixed in Central Europe, drank from bell-shaped beakers, and arrived in the British Isles 4,000 years ago. That ancestry built Skara Brae. No, that ancestry replaced the people who built Skara Brae. And the population that replaced them is the one Carnegie carried into Pennsylvania, the one Reagan carried into the White House, the one Robert the Bruce carried into Bannockburn. The men who carved the stones, your supposed ancestors, passed almost nothing of their genome down to you. The men who arrived after them, who buried their dead with bell beakers in the Rhine Valley and walked west, passed almost everything. Who were the men who built the stone circles of Scotland? Not your ancestors. A population whose lineage stops in the British record around 2000 before Christ, replaced by the steppe-descended migrants whose blood you carry. Your blood is not as old as your country. Your country is older than your blood. If you want to keep following this, the DNA evidence the history books left out, and what it does to the version of the past we were taught, subscribe. Turn the bell on if you don't want to wait to find out what the next bloodline is going to say. Every week, there is another piece of the record that turns out to be more complicated and more interesting than the version we were taught. Open the next tomb